Today, we're diving into a fascinating story where a super rugged, island-studded coastline forced the world's highest court to answer what seems like a simple question. Where does a country's land actually end, and where does the sea begin? You know, the answer literally changed the map of the world.
It sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? When is a coastline not a line? But this was the exact thorny problem at the very heart of the 1951 Fisheries case between the United Kingdom and Norway. And the answer? Well, it changed maritime law forever. So how on earth did a fishing dispute end up at the world's highest court? Well, this conflict had been simmering for centuries. After British fishermen had pretty much stayed away for 300 years, their new, modern trawlers showed up again in Norwegian waters in 1906. This, understandably, alarmed local communities. So by 1935, Norway drew a firm line with a royal decree. But when British trawlers kept crossing that line and kept getting arrested, the UK decided, all right, that's it, let's settle this once and for all. Now here's what's really, really interesting. Both countries actually agreed on the width of the fishing zone, 4 miles. The entire fight, the whole thing, was about the starting point. How do you even draw the line that you measure those 4 miles from? Okay, so the UK argued for the traditional method, tracing the low water mark. That's the line where the sea meets the land at its lowest tide. Just imagine trying to meticulously follow every single nook, every cranny of the coast. But Norway did something completely different. They basically played connect the dots between the outermost islands and rocks, creating a series of straight, clean lines as their starting point. Totally different approaches. So the UK's position was pretty straightforward. They were arguing for consistency, for the established rules of the road, you could say. Their lawyers came in with a really clear case. They said, look, the low water mark is the standard international practice, period. They admitted that, yeah, straight lines are okay, but only for closing off bays that are less than 10 miles wide. So from where they stood, Norway's method was this radical, completely illegal departure from accepted international law. But Norway's defense wasn't just about legal theory and dusty old books. It was about their physical reality. They had a coastline so unusual that, to them, the standard rules just didn't make any sense. This is just a stunning admission, and it comes directly from the court's final judgment. I mean, think about what that says. The coast does not constitute a clear dividing line between land and sea. The judges themselves recognize that Norway's whole argument was rooted in a physical reality that completely defied simple rules. To really get this, you have to understand the Skilsgjergard, which literally means rock rampart. And that's exactly what it is. It's this massive, continuous chain of islands and reefs that forms a kind of protective barrier. So Norway argued that this rampart, not the mainland hidden behind it, was its true coastline. So their defense really stood on 4 key pillars. First, they said, our geography is just exceptional, plain and simple. Second, this method isn't new. We've been doing this since 1812. Third, hey, the world, including the UK, knew about this and didn't complain for decades. And finally, and this is maybe the most important point, these specific waters are economically vital for the people who actually live there, who have fished them for generations. This left the court with a really tough choice. Do you uphold a general rule just for the sake of uniformity, or do you carve out an exception based on one country's unique, undeniable reality? I mean, really think about that for a second. If you were one of the judges, what would you decide? Should a one-size-fits-all rule apply to a country that is clearly not one-size-fits-all? Well, the decision was, to put it mildly, decisive. By a vote of 10-2, the International Court of Justice sided with Norway. It wasn't even close. The final judgment was crystal clear. Norway's method of drawing its baseline did not violate international law. It was a stunning victory for them, completely validating a system that was really born out of necessity. So how did the court justify this? Well, their reasoning was actually pretty elegant. First, they totally agreed. Norway's geography, with its Skjergard, was a truly exceptional case. Second, they found that even though the lines were straight, they still followed the general direction of the coast. Third, they validated Norway's historic rights, pointing out this system had been used and tolerated for a very long time. And finally, they recognized the economic reality, that these waters were essential to the survival of the people living there. But this wasn't just a win for Norway. The court's decision sent huge ripples across the globe, and it fundamentally changed maritime law. And this, right here, is the biggest takeaway. The fisheries case created a whole new tool for international law.
It formally established the principle of straight baselines, giving countries with deeply indented coastlines or fringes of islands a totally legitimate way to define their maritime borders.
So why does a case from 1951 still matter so much today? Well, for one, it proved that international law can actually be flexible and adapt to reality on the ground. It's the legal foundation used today by tons of countries, from Canada to the Philippines, to draw their borders. And that concept of historic rights, it's still a super powerful argument in sea disputes to this day.
But this whole story leaves us with one last, really provocative question for our time. This case was built on the idea of a fixed physical geography. But in an era of climate change and rising sea levels, coastlines aren't fixed anymore. So what happens to the laws that are based on these lines when the map itself is being redrawn by nature? That's definitely something to think about.